Hello everyone, and welcome to another video lesson brought to you by Practical.org, where we give you practical solutions for your classroom technology. Today's video lesson is actually part of a series of lessons that are all about creating a literary essay. This is the third of the videos, which deals with continuing to outline your essay by finding evidence. So let's get to it. But before we get any further, I want you to think of a scenario. Let's say one day you don't have your homework, and your teacher has had it, and she decides she's going to bring you before Judge Judy. Now, I know that's a completely ridiculous concept, but just bear with me. So there you are, standing before Judge Judy, and she asks, "Where's your homework?" And in response, you decide to make a claim, and this claim has been made by students for hundreds of years, and it is, "My dog ate it." And you say that, and then you look over at Judge Judy, but she's still looking skeptical. At this point, your claim isn't enough. She's not convinced. I mean, if Judge Judy always accepted people's claims as true, the legal system would be a very confused place with a whole bunch of contradictory information. So what does she say? She says, "Do you have evidence?" And now is the crucial moment. You pull out a picture of your dog actively consuming your homework. Now, Judge Judy has the evidence she wants. Your argument is validated. She's happy. You're innocent. Everything is wonderful. Why? Because you had evidence to support your claim. And that leads us perfectly back into the essay cake. We've already seen this cake before, and we know how each of the layers supports the one above it. In fact, in the previous videos, we already completed both the thesis and reasons. Today we're going to be working on evidence. Why? Because just like Judge Judy wasn't convinced that your dog ate your homework until you provided evidence, the reader of your essay won't be convinced of your thesis or your reasons unless you provide specific evidence to support them. So let's shift your essay from unfounded to grounded by locating some evidence. Before we're able to do that, here are just some rules that we should know. First off, you should know that you need 2 pieces of evidence for each reason. This will allow us to have a complete 5-paragraph essay in the end. So how do we find this evidence? Well, each piece of evidence should be specific, certainly more specific than the reason above it, and each piece of evidence should clearly support the reason above it. So now that we know the rules for locating evidence, let's actually try it out. And just as we did before, I want to take a look at this example that isn't based on literature, and it's one we've worked on before, just so you can see how the process works. So here's how we're going to do this. At the bottom, I want to put my guidelines. These guidelines will help me remember how to find 2 pieces of evidence for each reason. Now, we remember this thesis: the Yankees is the best baseball team of all time, and the 3 reasons. The team has great fan support, reason 1, the team has a history of success, reason 2, and the team had many great players, reason 3. But rather than focusing on all that and kind of getting overwhelmed, what I want to do is focus on one reason at a time, really isolate that one reason and come up with 2 pieces of evidence for it. So we'll start with reason 1. The team has great fan support. So I need 2 specifics that support the idea of fan support. Well, 1, 3.4 million tickets were sold in 2014. That's definitely something specific, and the fact that all those tickets were sold definitely supports the idea of fan support. So that one's good. Let me try a second one, because remember, we need 2 for each reason. The Yankees have many fans. As I read that one, I start to realize, and hopefully you do too, that it sounds exactly like the reason. The team has great fan support, the Yankees have many fans. That's just repetitive. That piece of evidence is not more specific. So it's breaking one of our ground rules of evidence. So what do we do if it's no good? We burn it. Get rid of it. We'll try this one instead. International fandom. Yankees merchandise is sold across the globe. Now that is something more specific than the reason that definitely supports the reason. So now we're good. Now that we're done with reason 1, I want to push everything else out of my mind and really just focus on reason 2. The team has a history of success. Now I need two specific pieces of evidence that support that reason. Okay? The Yankees have won 27 World Series. That's specific and it supports the idea of success. And now a second one. They have 100 or more wins in a season 3 times. That's definitely a specific fact that supports the reason of success. So now that we're set with reason 2, let's move on to reason 3. The team had many great players. Now this one's pretty easy to do, and I'm sure you can automatically think of a few of the great players the Yankees have had, but 2 that I thought of were Derek Jeter and his 3,000 plus hits, and Babe Ruth and his 714 career home runs. So there you can see I came up with 2 specific players, and they certainly support the idea of the Yankees having many great players. So there you have it, a completed 3-layer essay outline, a thesis, 3 reasons, and 6 pieces of evidence in total. So you can see this process is actually pretty straightforward if you break it down one reason at a time. But we're writing literary essays here, not essays about the Yankees. So why don't we take a look at a literary example, now that this one is all set. Now the literary example I'd like to show you is actually based on The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Now, keep in mind, even if you haven't read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, you should still be able to learn from the process that I go through. If you just follow the same process that I do, then you'll be fine for whatever book you happen to have chosen. So, just like we did with the Yankee example, why don't we take this one reason at a time? And, as always, keep our guidelines in mind at the same time. So we'll start then with reason 1. In the beginning, Huck embraces the ideals of others. So all I need to do is find 2 specific pieces of evidence or 2 specific moments that prove that in the beginning Huck embraces the ideals of others. Well, having read the book, I can come up with 2 pretty easily. 1, Huck goes along with Tom when Tom pranks Jim under the tree, and 2, Huck gives in to Pap's influence, stealing food as he and Jim travel down the river. So you can see there I came up with 2 specifics that each support the reason above it. Now that I'm done with reason 1, I'll move on to reason 2 and just focus on that one. In the middle, Huck begins to question what others in society have taught him. So again, 2 moments in which Huck begins to question others. 1, after stranding criminals on a wrecked steamboat, Huck attempts to save them. And 2, after playing a prank on Jim in the fog, Huck apologizes. Those are definitely both more specific and they both support the reason, so we're set. And finally, reason 3. In the end, Huck eschews values of others or pushes aside the values of others in favor of his own. I can think of 2 moments pretty easily. 1, despite the King and the Duke's scheme, Huck tells Mary Jane the truth. And 2, Huck rips up the letter he wrote, deciding that he'll go to hell if it means saving Jim. So there you can see I followed the exact same process I did for the Yankee one, but this time for a literary example, breaking it down one reason at a time, and it was pretty straightforward. Alright, I want to do one more based on literature, and this one I'm going to need your help with in a moment. This thesis statement that we already looked at in previous videos is actually based on a short story entitled A Retrieve Reformation. I have attached a link to that story in the description of this video so that you can read through the story. In fact, you'll have to read through the story in order to complete the exercise I'm going to ask you to do in a moment. But I'm going to do it with you at first. So, just a reminder, each piece of evidence should be specific, and each piece of evidence should clearly support the reason above it. So, our thesis, in A Retrieve Reformation, Jimmy Valentine and Ben Price are remarkably similar. Now, as always, I want to go one reason at a time. So reason 1 says they are both experts in their chosen fields. Since this is a character comparison thesis, what makes a lot of sense for the evidence is to do one piece of evidence about one character and the other piece of evidence about the other character, because that'll guarantee that they fully support the reason and each will be specific. So, I can say evidence 1, Valentine is an expert thief, and then I can say evidence 2, Price is an expert policeman. So there you could see how I have 2 specifics, one about one character and the other about the other character. And that's a really good idea if you're doing any sort of character comparison thesis. Moving on to reason 2, they're both persistent in their goals. Well, Valentine immediately turns to robbing banks even after being imprisoned. And then, of course, I have to do Price, who tracks Valentine for many months even though the trail has gone cold. Now the third one, they both experience major transformation, is where I'm going to ask for your help. So as you can see, I'm going to put evidence 1 and 2, but in there I say you try. Find a link to the story in the description. What I'd like for you to do is, using the many models I've already given you in this video, is read through the story and you come up with evidence 1 and evidence 2 for reason 3, so that you prove you know how to do it without my help. So tonight for homework, just to recap, you will complete the assigned work, locating 2 pieces of evidence for my sample. It's what I just said to you. Also, if you could please take notes in the video so that you can use them as a reference as you do work in class tomorrow. And as always, as you're taking notes, pausing the video will help. And then in class tomorrow, what we'll do is we will use the guidelines that I've presented in this lesson to select 2 out of the 4 outlines that you've already started making and locate 6 pieces of evidence for each. So by the end of class tomorrow, you will have 2 completed 3-layer essay cakes. And then in the future, I'll show you how to turn that into an essay. Have a great night.